So just know everything you say. These desks may be a little wet. If you, they have to marinate until like 9:01, and then you can wipe them down with a paper towel if you want. But it's supposed to sit there for 5 minutes, so we all stay safe and well fed. No, you sit wherever you like. Okay, so I have to now share this stream. Sorry. Copy, and I have to go over here, and I have to say add, not a file. This is so awful. Add a link. Oh, how we doing? Happy first day back. That's exciting. Is it super weird? Where did you go already today? Calculus. Oh, beautiful. Okay, so now I did that. So now I'll go on GroupMe. I'll say new link in. Hello, humans. New link in Classroom. Gosh, this is hard.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, oh my gosh, this is insane. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 emails I've received in the last 3 minutes. Oh dear. How are we gonna do this? Like I said, you guys are all live. Oh, I see Tate on the live chat. Isn't that nice? Oh my goodness, look at that. So we're gonna go with this. Here. And then I'm going to, oh my gosh, welcome you guys. This is so fun. Not. Oh yeah. Who's Eve Allen? Are you here?
Yeah.
You are? Okay, I called somebody in the last class your name because it was just the first name on the roster. Kaylin Olms, who looks nothing like you, but also is the first person on our roster. So welcome. Hey everybody, welcome. Oh my gosh, look at that. 2, 4, 6, 7 females. I feel outnumbered, outgunned. Oh dear, but you guys are this awesome. You take over the world. Okay, awesome. Does anyone need a paper towel? Is your desk wet? No, you good? I think it kind of dries in the sun. I don't know. Welcome. Oh. So here's the deal. Welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks for making English a part of your day. My name is Mr. Freeze, and I'll be your teacher for the day. If you're at home in the chat box, can you say hooray? So I know you're here and you can log in. If you're also here, the other place to log in would be, where is it? Sorry, is in the class comments box. Like I can see that too if you're at home, and they're on a delay, by the way. So welcome, thanks for coming. Looks like Tate and Zach and Alex can all chime in. All the boys are home, I guess. That's very strange. So if you guys could, well, actually, I've started class the same way for 25 years, so I'm not changing today just because this is psycho. So good morning. Thanks for coming. Thanks for making English part of your day. My name is Mr. Freeze, and I'll be your teacher for the day. I have a poem to start things off. Nope. And that poem is right here. This is a poem by Brian Turner, and it's called How Bright It Is. And it goes just like this. April, and the air is dry as the shoulders of a water buffalo. Grasshoppers scratch at the dirt, rub their wings with thin legs flaring out in front of the soldiers in low arcing flights, wings a blur. The soldiers don't notice anymore, seeing only the wreckage of the streets, bodies draped with sheets in the sun. How bright it is. How hard and flat and white. It will take many nails from the coffin makers to shut out this light, which reflects off everything. The calloused feet of the dead, their bony hands, their pale foreheads so cold, brilliant in the sun. And you guys say, welcome. So here's what we're going to do, my friends. I sometimes look a little scattered. And as a teacher, I sometimes look scattered anyway. But I am teaching humans in some other countries and like home and here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 monitors going right now to try to understand what the heck is going on. I'm streaming on YouTube. Look at that. I got all these comments. Like and subscribe down below, okay? I think I read up on YouTube. You can make money on YouTube if you get a lot of subscribers. So I think I'm getting all kinds of subscribers right now to my channel, which is awesome. So if you're at home right now, you're hearing me and you don't need anything because you've logged in. If you're at home, when you're at home, you can, right here, I have a picture of me. See, this is me, and it's the YouTube live thing. And there's a little chat box on the side. So I see, like I can see right now that Riker just said hooray. So if you have a question when you're at home, that's kind of be how we, oh, actually that goes under this. Welcome poem, new hybrid procedures I'll talk about. I have a video on time, tinkers, and homework. So that's what I was talking about right here. So right now, starting today, I'm going to do YouTube Live. So if you were to go on Google Classroom, there's no more Zoom link. It's a YouTube Live link. I think what I'm going to do, I tried to schedule the YouTube Live links that I tried to have them turn on automatically for each period, and I set that up over the weekend. But then when I got here this morning, it didn't look like that was going to work, and I'm not sure if it works. So what I ended up doing is I ended up creating a brand new live link right before first hour, right before this hour, and I'm going to do it again for fifth hour. But that's a pain in the butt. So what I may end up doing is I may end up tomorrow creating one link in the morning and just letting it play all day. And so for your period, if you're live, great. But if you were absent for some reason, you'd probably find like a 6-hour video and you'd have to forward until you found when this class was. I don't know. Because I don't know. Maybe we'll see if it works better. Who knows? Starting today, classes on YouTube Live. The link for each class's video will be on YouTube Classroom, which I think it is because we have all kinds of people logged in. Oh, I got a new subscriber. Alex Hossman just subscribed. If you're at home, and I'm going to be setting up a Patreon account too for you guys to make donations as well. Okay. Anyway, if you're at home, you're supposed to turn into class during class time. So you guys are here. I'm going to mark that you're here. Yeah. If you're at home, you're supposed to be in class. If you're not here, it's just like real school in the past, which is a lot of you are dressed alike, which is somebody at home would call in and excuse you. So it's no big deal. Just excused absence. What do you do? But unlike last year, if you are absent, there is, in theory, a video file of what we did. Who knows? While you're at home, you can ask questions and participate in the comment box. Now, there are 2 comment boxes. There's a comment box in Google Classroom, and there's a comment box in YouTube. So let me see if this works. Yeah, class comments. So if you're at home right now, could you make a comment in the Google Classroom comment box for me if you're at home? And then we're going to hopefully see that. Then what I'm going to ask is somebody in this room, I don't care who, and multiple, I'm going to ask that you have your laptop open, and then you guys can maybe see if people are saying something on the GroupMe, on Google Classroom, so that if somebody's at home, in theory, you're going to be their eyes and ears. So in theory, you would, nobody's commenting, but this worked last hour. Yep, there it is. Oh yeah, see, Tate did it and Zach did it. Yep, yay, see, they're commenting. So if they have a question at home, in theory, you would see that, or I hopefully can see it here. And that's how it's going to be. And I almost assigned you home buddies. Like you have somebody on the other that's home right now and you're keeping track of them and asking them your questions. When I have you group work, you would group with somebody at home. I think that would fail. Okay, each day as well, both for you guys who are in here and for online students, there's an attendance check at the beginning and the end of the class. If you're here, you don't have to do it right in class, but if you crack open your Chromebook, you'll just see an attendance question at the beginning of the class, and that just shows me you're here. But if you're at home, you have to do the attendance check. If you do it late, I'll assume you're tardy to class, but there's this window for like 10 minutes where I'm just having you fire up. But there's also one at the end of the class that proves you stayed the whole time. And so I knew you were here. That's an important thing. Makes sense? It's kind of awful. Yes, kind of terrible. Okay, that's all. So I should probably take attendance right now. Can you guys introduce yourself to me so I can, so far I've known a small box from you. I've known some videos that you guys sent me, and I also can now see the tops of your faces. which is just terrible. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna have a hard time learning your names, trust me. And it's not because you're not distinct, wonderful humans. It's because I can only see half your faces. And eventually, I probably will make a seating chart so that I can know names of places. So, can you guys just tell me who you are? Let's start back here.
Sydney.
Sydney, hi, welcome, Sydney. I'm gonna try to remember that. Okay.
Stephanie Kaiser.
Stephanie Kaiser. All right, Stephanie Kaiser. All right,
Heather Hunt.
Heather Hunt. Thank you so much.
Zulema.
Zulema. All right,
Jaden.
Jaden. Ash. Eve Allen. We already had that conversation. Yes. And Lennon. Cool. So I'm assuming that other people who aren't here, my name is Zach. Thanks, Zach. Okay, I'm going to try really hard to talk to you guys because that's why we're doing hybrid, in my opinion. We're not doing hybrid so that I can be saying this, so you can be watching me talk to a screen. So I'm going to try really hard to teach class. And if you're at home, I'll sometimes be in the view, and a bunch of times I'll be over here, but I think you can hear, whoop-de-doo. And it's not ideal, but it is what it is. So I'm going to try to teach class when you guys are in here. I'm going to try to make the most of that. You guys should do the same thing. When I say questions, comments, you guys are participating. If you're at home and you can participate, great. But really, it's not. The discussion is more for the humans in the room, I think. Okay. Comments, questions? Okay. So what we're going to do today is we're going to. I think I already did this. So let me do this. We're going to talk about the hybrid procedures. I have a video on time, and then we're going to talk about tinkers. And we're going to do that the entire period today. And then we're out of here at 10:18. So at about 10:13, I will I'll kind of tell you what we need to do for tomorrow and then for next week, because we actually have to. I won't see you guys again until the following Monday. So it's crazy how infrequently we'll see each other. I think last year I saw my students 45 times. I think I'll see you guys like 12 or 13 times. That's it, which is just crazy. So here we go. I'd like to show you this video on time. And you may have noticed that Tinker seems to be about the idea of time. It's about a lot of things. But I want to show you this video, and I want you to maybe think if it resonates with Tinkers a little bit. If you're at home, and when you're at home, these are all embedded in the slideshow, and they're in the supplemental materials. So if this is terrible and you can't hear it at home or whatever, just know that everything's online. I don't know. How is that going for you guys? Is my website okay? Is my classroom okay? Is the stuff accessible? Okay. I'm trying really hard to use Google Classroom and Zoom and YouTube Live. That's it. I mean, I know we can do a Kahoot and a Flipgrid and a WeVideo and a Jump board or a Jamboard or whatever, but I just want to have very few online tools. And so it kind of might be boring and repetitive, but I think maybe in your life, it's not boring because you have 5 different teachers with lots of platforms. What was your first hour class? What? Calculus? How did that go in person?
It's very quiet.
Was it? And how is that calculus person doing synchronous versus, or home students versus humans here?
It's just 1 or 2 classrooms like you, actually.
Are they doing something broadcasting too? Or
It's like a Google Meet for the people who are at home.
a Google Meet?
Like a lecture for.
Okay. Do you guys think you'll have any classes where what you do on like today will be completely flipped? Like the people at home are doing lesson X today and you're doing Y because you're here, and then the next day they do Y and you do X. Does that make sense? Because whatever we talk about today, I'm just gonna keep going tomorrow. You know? I guess you won't know that yet. And you know what? You can tell me in a week when I see you next, which is so stupid. Did you guys cover your plants outside? Okay, shut off the sprinkler. Tonight's going to be, what do you think? It wasn't snowy, was it? I heard everything from spitting like it is to 4 to 6 inches. So. All right. Isn't that crazy? You guys lost your prom. Now your first day of school, it's going to snow. Your pipes are going to freeze. And then you guys have to get your Common App done, right? When's your deadline for that? In the past. All right, here we go. Does time exist? Watch this. This is a TED Talk. I think it's pretty good. I'll take attendance. Here we go. Does time exist? That's good to think about at 9:15 in the morning. Here we go. Oh, come on.
The earliest time measurements were observations of cycles of the natural world, using patterns of changes from day to night and season to season to build calendars. More precise timekeeping, like sundials and mechanical clocks, eventually came along to put time in more convenient boxes. But what exactly is it that we're measuring? Is time something that physically exists? Or is it just in our heads? At first, the answer seems obvious. Of course time exists. It constantly unfolds all around us, and it's hard to imagine the universe without it. But our understanding of time started getting complicated thanks to Einstein. His theory of relativity tells us that time passes for everyone, but doesn't always pass at the same rate for people in different situations, like those traveling close to the speed of light, or orbiting a supermassive black hole. Einstein resolved the malleability of time by combining it with space to define spacetime, which can bend but behaves in consistent, predictable ways. Einstein's theory seemed to confirm that time is woven into the very fabric of the universe.
Woven
But there's
fabric.
a big question it didn't fully resolve. Why is it we can move through space in any direction, but through time in only one? No matter what we do, the past is always stubbornly behind us. This is called the arrow of time. When a drop of food coloring is dropped into a glass of water, we instinctively know that the coloring will drift out from the drop, eventually filling the glass. Imagine watching the opposite happen. Here, we recognize time as unfolding backwards. We live in a universe where the food coloring spreads out in the water, not a universe where it collects together. In physics, this is described by the second law of thermodynamics, which says that systems will gain disorder or entropy over time. Systems in our universe move from order to disorder, and it is that property of the universe that defines the direction of time's arrow. So if time is such a fundamental property, it should be in our most fundamental equations describing the universe, right? We currently have two sets of equations that govern physics. General relativity describes the behavior of very large things, while quantum physics explains the very small. One of the biggest goals in theoretical physics over the last half century has been reconciling the two into one fundamental theory of everything. There have been many attempts, none yet proven, and they treat time in different ways. Oddly enough, one contender, called the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, doesn't include time at all. Like all current theories of everything, that equation is speculative. But as a thought experiment, if it or a similarly time-starved equation turned out to be true, would that mean that time doesn't exist at the most fundamental level? Could time just be some sort of illusion generated by the limitations of the way we perceive the universe? We don't yet know, but maybe that's the wrong way of thinking about it. Instead of asking if time exists as a fundamental property, maybe it could exist as an emergent one. Emergent properties are things that don't exist in individual pieces of a system, but do exist for the system as a whole. Each individual water molecule doesn't have a tide, but the whole ocean does. A movie creates change through time by using a series of still images that appear to have a fluid, continuous change between them. Flipping through the images fast enough, our brains perceive the passage of time from the sequence of still images. No individual frame of the movie changes or contains the passage of time, but it's a property that comes out of how the pieces are strung together. The movement is real, yet also an illusion. Could the physics of time somehow be a similar illusion? Physicists are still exploring these and other questions, so we're far from a complete explanation, at least for the moment. If time does exist, you'll probably want a brief history of it.
Okay, that's enough of that. So part of like what I find fascinating about that is the same questions that they're answering down there in the physics classroom are the same questions that we struggle with in literature and religion and philosophy. You know, the idea of like, where do humans exist in time and what is time? And I think this book kind of breaks it down. So here's what I want to do today. So on this little slideshow, let's see if I click here, boom, there you go. Today, what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a copy of the AP rubric today. We're going to look at the by the pendant section, which is on page 34 in your book. We're going to look at that carefully. I'm going to give you the crossing, and we're not going to actually get to it today. So then you're going to have those papers. If you're at home, you're going to get these papers tomorrow when you come in the room, but they're also on my website. You could print them out at home if you want, okay? And then we're going to talk about chapter 2 today and chapter 1. We're going to mix it all together. Tomorrow, we'll talk about 2 and maybe 3, but 3 brings us back to 1 because I'll always be bouncing around. So that's just the plan for today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn off the projector. And then we're just going to talk about Tinker. So if you want to have a Tinker's book, some people try to take notes in my class, and it's chaos. You know, you can try. But some people just write down their ideas in their book, which is, I think, a good place. But it's up to you. This is what we talked about last hour. And maybe you guys always have that benefit. I'm going to erase this, but we tried to talk about what is Tinker's about, and you'll notice the word time isn't up there, but it is about. Tinker's is totally about time. If you want to know that, like in one word, the Iliad is about honor. The next time somebody comes up to you and says, "Did you read the Iliad?" You're like, "Yeah." They're like, "Well, what's it about?" You're like, "Honor." Okay, and that's it, because that's a theme that transcends the book. Yes, it's about Achilles and it's about Hector and it's about an argument, but it's about honor. So if you want, in one word, what's Tinker's about? I don't know, time, but it's also about order and chaos and identity and boundaries and separation and perspective and imagination and the idea of construction and honor and ideas. Oh, honor, that's like the Iliad. Wow. So anyway, but we'll throw up words on the board too, okay? I gave you a list of images that was pretty concrete. Like I said, there are images of cosmic for, you know, the cosmos, like planets and celestial objects. And there are images of insects. But I never gave you a list of themes because there are themes in Tinker's, but you kind of have to grab them on your own through discussion and through all this nonsense. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to use that last image from the video with Einstein on the boat to talk a little bit about the book. And I bounce around a lot in the book. So here's what I want to do. And keep in mind, your pages are 10 different than mine. So if I'm ever confused, you just correct me. So I'd like to go to page 42 in your hymnal. Let's start there. On page 42 in your hymnal, George, this is a little vignette that starts a couple pages earlier, and George is dying in the bed, which he's doing the entire book, okay? And on page 42, George is doing this survey of his room. I guess if you flip back to like page 40, he's kind of thinking about like when he was a smoker and buying like these pipes that he bought. Then he looks over at the Queen Anne chair on the top of page 40 and thinks about him smoking and the chair he used to smoke in. And then bottom of page 40, he looks at a still life painting, which is pretty interesting because the whole point of a still life painting is it is capturing a moment in time. Still life are often paintings of things like flowers and fruit because those are temporary. And they will forever be preserved in that moment of time in the painting, you know, as beautiful and non-fleeting. I think the video showed the idea is that the universe is moving toward a system of chaos or disorder, entropy. But the idea is that some things can be held in a moment where they're very much ordered. And then he looks around and he sees like some of the other artifacts in the room until he gets all the way to page 32. And then 42. And then this is going to, so I have that for econ. Okay. On page 42, he sees this painting on the wall. And then he's going to go around some more and he's going to listen to the clocks. And then he's going to have a conversation with, I believe it's Sam. It might be Charlie. That's Charlie. He's going to have a conversation with Charlie about the clocks all striking at the same time. That's what this vignette is. 42. On page 42, 5 lines from the top, 6 lines from the top, it says there was another oil painting. And so this, in my opinion, is a little bit of a segue from the video we just saw. The idea in the video that we saw is, what is time? And is time a series of fixed moments that we string together into something we call a flow of time? Do we weave them together to try to create this fabric? Is time a two-dimensional thing, or a three-dimensional thing, a one-dimensional thing? Or is it beyond dimension? I just got a book in it. Where is it in here? I have this book called Time's Arrow. I love this book. I always want to teach it. That's why I keep it in that cabinet. It's called Time's Arrow. This book, it's amazing because it's written backwards. So the first sentence of the book is like, it's actually the last sentence in the story. So the book is completely backwards. And so when people have a conversation, if you read it forwards, it makes sense. But if you start at the bottom of the page and you read it upside down, it makes sense, but in a completely different way. So this book is written completely backwards. It's brilliant, but confusing. Maybe I should make you guys do that. I don't know. It's called Time's Arrow by Martin Amis. It won the Booker Prize, or he has won the Booker Prize. Anyway, but if time is a series of stationary moments, I think we have this idea reflected on page 42. In your paper, you have to say, one of your papers, you have to say like that Paul Harding uses imagery to create meaning. Well, one of the kinds of imagery he uses is imagery of ships. There's lots of boats and lots of references to sailing and sailors and canoes and boats and all that stuff. So here we have this portrait of this oil painting of the Gloucester schooner. It goes like this. It's on page 42, 6 lines from the top. There was another oil painting hanging above the desk. This one of a packet schooner sailing out of Gloucester in stormy weather. It was a scene of roiling dark greens and blues and grays swarming around the lines of a ship, which was seen from the rear. Notice all the active verbs there, swarming and roiling. The insides of the very tips of the waves were illuminated from within. Fire and water together, what? With sourceless light. Now here's the key. So Paul Harding is now invoking the second person to invite the reader to become the viewer. And I think in that video you saw the question that time is based on how one sees things. So in this book, if this book is about time, another thing this book is about is it's about perspective. It's about how we see. And if how we see things, do we see what things are truth, or do we see lies? Are things that we view imagined? Because right now, George is imagining things in his head, or are things real? And you'll notice that we have tensions here between opposites. That's one way to get to complexity in your paper, is to think of the footbook. Did I share the footbook with you guys? No? Did I not share the footbook with you? When you're a little kid, you're taught immediately that the world has language associated with it. You're like, hey, that's an apple. Apple, see, apple. So we're taught that what we hear is also tied to what we see, because we are huge into classifying. Humans really believe in order. And the more we can order the universe, I mean, think of how ordered this school is. We have rooms with bells, and we try to control place and time. We've taken the entire kind of broad quilt of human existence and broken it into science, math, history, like where all these things weave together in this kind of muddy dispersion like we saw in the video. So order, and then of course, if we think in terms of antonyms, chaos. The book begins in chaos, right? George is laying in bed, and what happens? His house falls apart on him. And everything that he had filed away and put in the attic now comes tumbling down. His life, which was ordered. I started as a teacher, then I retired, then I started building clocks. All of his life, which was ordered, is now fragmented. The book is fragmented. Some people read this book and they're like, this book is a messy, chaotic mess. And you're like, thank you, Friesen, for making us that little sections chart. Does that help you at all? Do you ever look at that thing where you can figure it out? Well, the reason I can put chaos next to order and imagine next to real and true next to lie is because of this. We teach kids immediately when they're little kids that the world is built on dichotomies. So instead of just saying you have a foot, okay, what we say is things like left foot, right foot, right. So we know what something is by knowing these are my rebel shoes. Aren't they nice? They have say rebels on the back. Isn't that cool? I have Columbine, Converse. Left foot, right. So one thing we're taught immediately is that you can define something by saying it is not its opposite. Okay, and that's called litotes in literature. If you get a new haircut and somebody's like, well, I don't dislike it. And you're like, wait a minute, if I cross out the negatives, you like it. Okay, that's not exactly the same. And unfortunately, you guys live in a world that I've never seen this polarized, where that is a repelling force between opposites. But you guys know from math, science, that opposites actually attract. In the world, opposition is required for attraction. That's how physics works. And so left and right, are they oppositional? Or are they two halves of a unified yin-yang ohm? Anyway, left foot, right foot, right. Okay, you guys help me along. Feet in the day, feet in the... See, you guys don't even have to have the book. And then I would say wet foot, dry foot, low foot, back feet, feet. How many different feet can you meet? Slow feet, fast feet. See, you guys can think this way. Well feet, ill feet, or sick feet, yeah. Up feet. Here come clown feet. Small feet. So we could say order feet, chaos feet. And that's one thing I'm going to ask you to do when you write about a paper. You're like, I really want to write about the nature of order in this book. I'm like, cool. Where's their chaos? And how do we play these things against each other? If you ever were in Mr. Webb's class in the past, I've taught the same way for 24 years because when I was in high school in this room, one lady taught me one thing, which is start every single thesis you ever write with the word while. Because if you say while, you are forced to say a dichotomy. You have to say something that conflicts. You're going to get a letter from a school that you want to attend, and it'll say, you are an exceptional student, and you have sent us a wonderful resume. You're like, okay. Somebody else might get a letter that says, while you are an exceptional student, and you send us your application, and you're like, here it comes. Okay, and that's why while is a powerful thing, is it shows you're automatically understanding that the world is built on tensions. And if you can create tensions in your writing, it shows you understand complexity. And we live in a world right now that is automatically pushing people to edges, okay? You are not the thing you are not. Pick a political party, and you are the opposite of the thing you are not, right? We are forced into that world right now. So that's today's attendance question when you go home and ask, is are you eligible to vote in this year's election? Is this your first vote, Or are you like me, and I had to wait until I was in college to vote in my first election? I voted for Ronald Reagan in 1988. I was on this thing. If you watch the straight lines of the schooner's masts and rigging, so we have things which here are very straight and controlled. Storm up, ship was not under sail. If you watch those straight lines long enough in the dim light of an early evening or on a rainy day, the sea would begin to move at the corners of your vision. They would stop the moment you looked directly at them, only to slither and snake again when you returned your gaze to the ship. So there's this really strange idea here that I think resonates a little with the video we just saw, which is the idea is like, is time a fixed thing, or is time static and fixed, or does time have the ability of being movement? Do we live in a universe that is constantly changing, or do we live in a universe of constancy? And that's why we love things like cycles, because a circle would create both of these. We talk about time as an arrow, time as a timeline, but clocks are built on circles because even though the more they change, the more they stay the same. The universe is built on cycles that stay the same, right? You're like, dang it, it's I can't believe it's changed. It was 93 degrees yesterday, and today it's 38. But guess what? It always gets colder this time of year because of the cycles of the universe. There's a constant that we can count on that we always have to turn our sprinklers on. So anyway, we have this little moment here. And so here's what we do. I don't know what I want to write about, but I think I want to write about I really like this idea of that movement can be found within fixed forms. And I really like that moment where George is not looking at the picture. This idea, these are our themes, and that's what you can write your paper about. You can write your paper about a theme. You have to write your paper about an idea. But here's the problem. You cannot write about an idea. You have to tell me how imagery creates the idea, which means you must always begin with text. And that's what's going to frustrate you, is that you really want to write about the idea of that all stories that the lies found in stories are actually truths because of perspective. The idea that we believe what we think is true. Or no, I'm sorry. What we think. No, what we perceive is what we think is our truth, if that makes sense. But you can't write about that. What you have to do is say, I looked at a lot of ships in the book, and the ships made me think this. So our first ship we have on page 42. And here's where I want to start today. I want to start today with George. George in chapter 2. Sending a mouse out on a boat and burning it. Okay. So if you guys go to page 87 in your book, on page 87, we are in, and I bounce around a lot. On page 87 in your book is the third vignette in chapter 2. Chapter 2 and 3 are kind of work together. These are kind of Howard chapters because they're mostly focused on Howard, and George is always a boy in chapters 2 and 3, always. Okay. In chapters 2 and 3, we have no of the Davenport sections where we're talking about clocks. We have none of the Borealis sections. Okay. So chapters 2 and 3 are pretty, and they're actually linear. The events that happen in chapters 2 and 3 kind of go in time. Chapters 2 and 3 are in order, sort of. The reason that's the case is if you put your figure on 87, I believe, I've read this book a bunch of times. If you guys go to page 68, I'll point something out to you on page 68. George is lying in bed, and he's really dehydrated, and his sister and his one of his daughters and his grandson Sam are tending to him. Very watery section on pages 68, 69. And 5 lines from the top of the page, George says, "That was good. I'm so thirsty." That's the last thing George says out loud. So here's my theory. My theory is George slips into a coma or some sort of a deep sleep after this happens. Because this is right when, right after he says that, we go into the Tempest Borealis section on page 69, which is the craziest Borealis section we've had so far. And we'll talk a little bit later about what we think those Borealis sections are today. Then you get to page, like 70 through 74. That's the description of Howard going out into the woods and then weaving that panel. Didn't we talk about this a little bit in this class? He weaves the panel and he goes into that fugue state. It's on the bottom of page 74, right before the break. He weaves the panel. He hears the hum. The hum comes into his brain and vibrates, and he loses time. Okay. So Howard loses time in that gap on page 74, even though the author is going to remind us exactly what time is, because on the bottom of 74, we have that return to George. But I believe now George is deep inside wherever George is right now. On page 74 at the bottom, that's where we get that. I think that's what I ended with last week was the mosaic part with the shifting tiles and all that. And it got really crazy as we went back to Adam. And we wondered if I have more space than tiles. And in my great-grandson's memories, what will the space be? And it gets crazy. And it was super confusing. And on the bottom of page 76, he talked about, I am finally a pattern scattered, which is kind of a fun thing because a pattern is order and then scattered is chaos. That's on page 76, right before the gap, 2 lines up. I'm a final pattern scattered. Can you live with it? And this is a wonderful thing. I am a pattern scattered. When I use that phrase, pattern scattered, you notice how I take away the arrow here? I create a 2-word term, which is a blended opposition. Like if you believe in constant change, you believe in an oxymoron, constant change. Those words should never go together. Right? Like bitter, sweet, I don't know. You guys know oxymorons, right? So this book is full of lots of oxymorons, and the realization that we can put oppositions together and it doesn't create chaos. It actually creates this kind of Zen-like yin yang where black and white can be together in unity. They don't lose what they are. They don't become gray, but they can coexist, Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if our political season, we found the middle ground between parties? Wouldn't that be an amazing thing? Because the average American lives between 2 extremes, okay? But ultimately we are pushed to, we think that the arrows push apart as opposed to bringing together. But anyway, George is going to resolve his life in a final pattern scattering at the end. And then the last thing that happens in chapter 1 is Howard comes home. So Howard heard a buzzing and something happened. We go to the mosaic section, and at the bottom of page 76, Howard stands in the doorway and he's lost time. As a matter of fact, it says pretty nice on page 79, about 7-8 lines from the bottom. It says 2, 4, 6, 7, 8 lines from the bottom. It says, as he staggered through the door, so that's the beginning of the chapter, on the bottom of 79, Kathleen, his wife, took up with the evening as if it were 5 p.m, and she had just slid the 5 o'clock hour to the 9 o'clock hour and took the 4 hours between them and banished them. So in that moment, time is banished. There's no such thing as 4 hours taking 4 hours. In that moment, all time is one, that 5 and 9 can just be the same moment or right next to each other. And on the last 3 lines, it says, and her children into a type of abatement, leaving each of them, last 3 lines on 79, and herself with the burden of 4 hours, that each would have to juggle the mind for the rest of their lives, first as a single, strange, indigestible, I'm on the top of page 80, puzzlement, and then later as a prelude to the night nearly a year later, when she and the children again sat in front of full plates of food, waiting for Howard, waiting for the sounds of the cart and the mule, and tacking back, and he never came back at all. So we are at that moment, cast forward to the end of chapter 2, where George abandons his family. If you read what I asked you to read, Howard abandons his family at the end of chapter 2. So these are these real clear markers, right? And that's what we like to have. We like to have the markers in George and Howard's life. So anyway, to make a long story short, on the bottom of page 80, and we're getting to the part with the mouse and the boat in a second. On the bottom of page 80, excuse me, the kids go to bed, and George helps put his brothers and sisters down. And the last image you get at the end of chapter 1 is Howard overstoking the fire. And the room gets hot. It talks about the stove and the overstoked fire, and it glows in the heat. Now, you could argue, if you want to try to be literal, what is George doing right now? George is dying in this bed. He keeps calling for water, and he's perhaps gone under, and he is hot in his imaginations. But then you get chapter 2 on page 81, and you begin, I think the book could begin right here. Chapter 2 is a beginning. It starts with the morning, it starts with the verb began, and it starts with the dusk. So it says, one of the things this book is about boundaries. And what I think about what is interesting about boundaries is this area right here between opposites. So you have, is it day or is it night? Well, we have this boundary called dawn and dusk that lives in between the two. Is it light or is it dark? This book is full of shadows, Am I awake or asleep? These are all opposites, left foot, right foot, right, asleep foot, awake foot, And there's this boundary in between where we're dreaming, perhaps, between being asleep and awake. And so we have this moment where Howard is... chapter 2 begins, and we have the book starting. This is actually 1926. In many ways, this is where the book should have started. If you think this book is frustrating, you might have liked if the book had started in chapter 2. With a morning in 1926, getting up, doing the chores, meeting Howard, meeting George. Then we could have had Howard and George, and then we learn about Howard's job. We learn that he and his wife don't really get along that much, and we learn that he has seizures, and by the end of chapter 2, he leaves. And then in chapter 3, what's going to happen? Well, George is going to go looking for his father, literally, in chapter 3. And then we could fast forward to 1995, which was the beginning of chapter 1, and we could say he's still looking for his father on his deathbed. But what we've done is we've created a scattered pattern by Paul Harding mixing the book up. If I had Paul Harding to ask, one thing I'd ask him is, how did you plan out this book? Did you write it in order and then break it? Or did you write it? How did you do this? Did you write chapter 1 first? Anyway. Since we're here, page 81, the mornings began in the dark. So we have this another transitional moment, this boundary moment. They began with setting the home in order. Okay, what happened at the beginning of chapter 1? The very first thing that happened in chapter 1, our house fell into chaos. So the architectural imagery, roofs, houses, windows, porches, reveals perhaps a tension between the human need for order and chaos. I think it's amazing. Like my parents are retired, and you know what they do? They buy puzzles and they put puzzles together. What a silly thing to do is to put a puzzle together. But I think that doing puzzles, do you guys like to do puzzles? Puzzles satisfy, I think, an incredibly deep human need to make order out of chaos. Okay? And it is this incredible idea that there is, I don't know what this is. Oh, it's a fish, because I made a picture of a fish, and yay, it's all there. So this idea of settling the world in order in chapter 2, we have it. This is all George ever wanted. Lying in bed, watching his house collapse, all he wanted was order. Well, here's order. The mornings began in the dark. They began with this. You see even the repetition of began. We get that parallel structure there. Everything's put in its place. Even the sentences line up. Began with setting the home in order for the day so that it might already be industrious when the sun climbed first the invisible horizon and then the branches of the dark trees. By the way, what's a horizon? I think it's kind of an interesting phrase there. Invisible horizon. Is that an oxymoron? Because what is a horizon entirely based on? Your ability to see it. There's no such thing as a horizon without seeing. Because a horizon is what? Where you see the edge of two opposites, the earth and the sky, that which is concrete and the ethereal abstract of the sky. The horizon is the boundary between those two things, based 100% on your perspective. How far is the horizon? When you're on a mountain, because you've elevated your perspective, the horizon is farther away. So anyway, then what do you get in the second paragraph on page 81? Fill the stove box with wood. Fill the milk pail with milk. How that pail clanking against George's leg as he crosses the yard with seamless night wakes the other children who sniffle and yawn and root. Interesting image of trees. We already had trees, branches, and wood. Now we have a root. And the kids are going to root deeper into warm beds. Does that have something to do with, I don't know, burrowing like George is doing? Anyway, but they root deeper in their warm beds, dreading the cold air, burr, and the morning chores. Mother will find Marjorie sitting up in bed and wheezing. Darla will open her eyes and say, "The sun's late. The sun's late. I'm sure it was up earlier yesterday." What's that? So now Paul Harding is using images of celestial objects like the sun to make us question the constancy of time. But wouldn't Einstein have said that's true? Because time is completely based on perspective. Time flies when you're having fun, slow when you're in English class. Okay. Bottom line is the idea that can an individual's perspective on time change reality? Mommy, something's wrong. Joe will be found with a foot in the wrong leg of his overalls, grinning and asking for pancakes and maple syrup, his favorite meal. Fetch the water, make a fire. How much water and fire have we had intertwined in this story so far? Did you notice the first two sentences in that second paragraph and the last two sentences all begin with a verb? Fill the stove box, fill the milk pail, fetch the water, make a fire. You guys taking French or Spanish, you know that those are sentences written in the imperative. Okay, the imperative is a command, right? Well, so let's set the world in order. We're going to use sentence structure that shows that. Paul Harding doing this. If you guys took French or Spanish, you know that the verbs that are in the imperative are in the you form of verb because there's a hidden you there. You fill the water. You sit up straight. When everybody says shut up, what they're really saying is you shut up. And so who is the you? And you turn the page real quick on the top of page 82. It says, your cold mornings are filled with heartache. And I think what people do at the beginning of this chapter is they think you are George because you had that little parenthetical that mentioned George, but this is really Howard. So now we are fully inside Howard's mind. So chapters 2 and 3 I think they're much more, chapters 1 and 4 are, George is more prominent as our base. Whereas 2 and 3, Howard is much more the subject of the story. If you had to ask me who the protagonist of this book is, I'm going to say George because he will own chapters 1 and 4. But who is the protagonist of chapters 2 and 3? It's Howard. This is now Howard's story. So now we are fully in Howard's story as we learn on pages 72 and 73 that he kind of has a resentful wife and he has an ache in his heart and all this stuff. It's on page 73. Page 73 links back to page 83. You're 10 different than me. You guys are just swapping me out, right? Page 83 is 10 different. First new paragraph on 83. This morning, the Monday morning. Do you see how deliberate Paul Harding is here with giving us markers of time, right? This morning, the Monday morning, after the Friday morning. when there was a pre-dawn snow. Look at all these markers of time. What you might be nice to know is this is the year 1926. It might be nice to have that kind of a marker too, you know? We certainly have time of day, time of week. But anyway, there was a pre-dawn snow, and Howard had stopped in a field that had once been a homestead. Remember that ruined house? And he was in a fugue state. That's on page 70 in your book. So now we go back in time to the thing that was, you know, for Howard, 9 years earlier, but for George, just a few hours ago. Anyway, it said this morning, 48 hours ago. He made a contraption out of twigs and grass and flowers. That's the panel, which he had already forgotten making. And he had a seizure, and he awoke freezing in the field, and he'd finally realized who he was, and he had made his way home this morning, brought fear that there was somewhere on the back roads he intended to canvass another seizure, another bolt of lightning coiled behind a rock or stump within the hollow of a tree, some strange nest bird, which is passing would trigger to spring explode and impale him. So now we kind of are deep within Howard's kind of vision of things that he's ultimately waiting for this attack. And it's going to happen. Okay. We're going to see, we've already seen it once and we're going to see it again, but we're going to see it. If you read what I asked you to read, and I totally get if it's confusing, but if you read chapter 2, the biggest scene in the book is Christmas dinner, 1926, when Daddy has a seizure in front of his children and everything goes crazy. And George has an epiphany. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Okay. So now we're back. We're back with this very, very clear restart of the book, but now we're in a different phase. So now finally we learn a little bit about, the vanity and playing cribbage with Dad on the charts. Are you guys cool with the bottom of 86 when he's playing cribbage with his dad? And the only reason I say this is because my own daughter, she happens to unfortunately have her dad as a teacher. And she asked me one question about this book. She's like, what's going on with the italics, on the bottom of like page 76. So what happens with the italics is we have a literal typographical way of distinguishing two narrators. So now we have George's voice inside Howard's voice, which I think is inside George's head. Does that make sense? We have this layer of who's telling the story. And so he's talking a little bit about him recollecting what it was like to be himself, but he's recollecting within his father's narrative. Anyway, so we do have these kind of little intrusive moments, I guess I would call them, which gets us to where we want to be, which is at the bottom of 87. And I've talked a lot. You guys came to school not just to listen. You guys came to school to be involved. So right now we've got like 7 people in the room. This is like a private school. This is amazing. This is so sweet. I'll show you later. So bottom of page 87. Here's what we're going to do. I want to read this entire vignette, which is George building the mouse barge, okay, and burning the little baby mouse. Or I don't know. I made it more sad than it is. It's any mouse, okay? It doesn't have to be a baby mouse. Bottom of 87. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read like 2 paragraphs, and then I'm going to stop. And then I want you to turn to the smart kid next to you, and you guys just talk about what you noticed. So that's going to maybe, I don't know if you guys want to kind of form a little trio here of talking, right? And then maybe pair up, or 4 of you, who cares? All right. So remember what you have to do. I will always start with the text. When you write a paper for me, you're not allowed to say something without saying, here's something in the book, and here's my ideas that come out of it. We wouldn't be here without the poets and the authors we read. So we always begin with the text. So I will start with the text by reading 2 paragraphs. And then you'll say, oh, I like this line in the text because it raises this idea, or this resonates with this, or I'm totally confused, but we always start with text. Bottom of page 87. Here we go. What of miniature boats constructed of birch bark and fallen leaves, hunched onto cold water, clear as air? How many fleets were pushed out towards the middles of ponds or sent down autumn brooks, holding treasures of acorns or black feathers, or a puzzled mantis? Let those grassy crafts be listed alongside the iron hulls that cleave the sea, for they are all improvisations built from the daydreams of men, and all will perish, whether from ocean siege or October breeze. And what of barges made to burn? One evening at sunset, as he was walking through the woods near the house after dinner, Howard caught sight of George kneeling on a path, examining something on the ground. George did not hear him, so Howard stood quietly in the trees and watched his son. George rose and hurried back up the path toward the house. He ran out of Howard's view, and at a moment later, the door to the front porch slapped shut. Howard went to where his son had knelt and found a dead mouse, curled as if sleeping on the leaves. It had not been dead for long. Its head went back and its limbs opened up when Howard toed it with his boot, after which it curled back up again. The porch door swung shut again, and Howard stepped back into the shadows in the trees. So I'm going to shut up, and it's kind of weird, but just what did you notice in those 2 paragraphs? To talk to the smart kid next to you, just about what you see in 2 paragraphs. It could be imagery, theme, connections, ideas. If you're at home, talk to yourself.
They both see each other, but interesting that there were I think I talked about that. It's kind of like "30 seconds. So one thing you were taught like probably a long time ago is when you write a paper,
That's nice. When you write a paper, you're supposed to do an intro that grabs attention before your thesis. I would argue the second sentence of the first paragraph that begins page 88. That's kind of like that's what's going to happen in this entire vignette. What is vignette number 3 on chapter 2 about? It is about one evening at sunset when he's walking through the woods near dinner and Howard catches sight of his son. So this is basically, it's a spying vignette. Okay, it takes place at a boundary between light and dark. This is a sunset time. So this is a time in between. This is an in between time, I think, that's happening. So here, that's all you do. All you do is pick something you noticed. Like I noticed the second sentence in the second thesis for what's going on. What did you guys notice? Give me anything in this little section. I'll go. First volunteering of your senior year. Come on. Yeah, wait, hold on. I gotta learn names. And you're like, well, why do you know my name? I've been in class 2 weeks. No. No. Let's see. Okay, got it. Yes. Okay. I'm going to say 367. I'm going to say you have to be Jaden.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you got?
Okay, so we kind of talked about like the imagery and like what it like led to us like thinking and like the first part of the like paragraph that you read. So like first what we saw is like at the end of the first paragraph it like talks about like an October breeze.
Yes.
And we thought that the imagery really like well represented like what you think of when you think of October, and like then we started talking about the cycle of seasons and how like October and like November are kind of like the fall is like a really big changing point because it's when
transition
everything goes from like to alive and like vibrant and green to
right.
dead and like dark and
nice.
There.
So if you're going to write a paper, let me put this out. If you're going to write a paper and you're going to talk about weather imagery in the paper, and you're going to talk about the breezes, right? So the breeze in this first page of the book on page 17, it's a sudden breeze. And now the breeze on page 88 is a October breeze. The power is almost never, well, sometimes it is. But the power is often not in the weather image. It's in the word attached to it. It's in the verb or the adjective or whatever. So we get to the idea of change through the word October, so which is attached to the weather image. Does that make sense? Okay, keep going. You had more?
Well, we just kind of connected that to the different things, like not only like the chaos and like chaos and order, but the changing constants.
Right.
And it's just like we thought because when we think of like fall changing, it's not like one side or the other, but it's like a mixture of everything, and it's like chaotic because everything's just like going and changing so fast and like.
Absolutely. No, I get that. Absolutely. And so you have that chaos, even like right there on the top of the page. Alex is chiming in from home. He says, that line, they are all improvisations built on the daydreams of men. So that chaos with like improvisations and daydreams. And isn't that what George is doing right now? Isn't everything we're reading the improvisation built on the daydream of the dying man right now? The whole book is that. But then it's also right next to the very ordered thing of like the iron hull of the boat, more boat imagery. Yes, and you had Stephanie.
Something else that I thought that like might be saying is like commenting on what we put value on in our lives, because sometimes this simple like grassy craft to the iron hulls that cleave the sea, but he likens them, and like they all will perish. And I think like the image of like an ocean siege versus an October breeze, like one's pretty fragile, like he doesn't have a gust of wind of breeze, versus like this destructive force. So I think it's showing that like
siege.
Your value, like it's so interesting like what we consider to be like the iron hulls of our life versus the grassy crafts, but at the end of the day it all ends. And so
so we have the grassy craft versus the iron hull, natural, man-made, kind of weak or whatever versus firm. And then you had the idea of the siege versus the breeze. And did you notice they're both attached to things that start with the ocean siege and the October breeze? Siege and breeze, they almost are rhymes because they have assonance behind them. So you're blending there. Very nice. What else? What else in the beginning of this little section about the boats? Anything in that second big paragraph where where Howard's spying, being a creeper dad? Anything? Hold on. You're Lennon. I knew that.
So we didn't talk about this, but I thought it was kind of interesting where he's talking about the dead mouse. And
Yeah.
how he kind of kicks it and its legs like move again. And
Right.
The idea of like reflexes and
Mhm.
kind of carrying on after death. How death is kind of like a kind of a timeline, like versus just it ends. It kind of is. I guess that's kind of what this whole focus is on.
Yep.
It's not just a simple moment. It's a
We're
process.
living in this boundary between life and death, right? In this whole book. Like, is it dead yet? You know, that's great. Yeah. So there's not that certainty of death in that moment.
Yeah.
Nice. What else? Anything else? One thing I do want to point out is that in this moment when George runs into the house, it says he ran out of Howard's view, which is really interesting because George is now remembering something that his father did when his father was spying on him and George didn't know. And now George can't even see Howard. So like, how much do we want to believe this is real? You know, is this real? This story that we're going on? Or is this an imagined truth, you know, that, I put these things backwards, right? Imagine should go with lies. Is this an imagined lie that George is taking for the real truth because he's basing it on, it's the only thing he sees. In his mind right now, George is absolutely seeing this moment. He's spying on his father, spying on him. Which was kind of weird. Yes, wait, you are Heather.
Yes.
And that's
Like and subscribe. Sorry.
Yes. Well, and that's a question that the choice of saying Howard's view rather than anything else, that's a question that raises this doesn't matter unless it's out of his perspective.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's no truth once it's out of his view, right? Because we don't know what's going on in there because the door slams shut and it's, yeah, nice. Okay, let's go back to this. George returned to the mouse and wrapped it in a newspaper and bound the shroud tightly with kitchen string. He stuffed the wrapped mouse into an empty box of kitchen matches. Howard smelled kerosene and understood his son had soaked the newspaper with it. Here's the big paragraph. There was a small pond through the woods behind the yard, and it stopped. What time are we on here? 10:18. We better hurry. We're going to stop after. Well, we'll see. We got to move. And it stopped. It was a stopping place for 2 pairs of ducks and a small flock of geese from Canada every year. Its depth was no more than 5 feet at its deepest. Sometimes George fished there and caught small brook trout, which he cooked over a fire he made at the edge of the water. If it was a Saturday, he fished at sundown, when during the early summer there were mayfly and drake hatches and that brought trout up to the surface to feed. At some point, bats would flit from the darkness out of the water to feed on the insects. George would stop fishing then because the bats struck at his fishing fly, and he had imagined terrible notions of frantic squeaking bat impaled on the barbed hook, trying to free itself and only breaking its own fragile wings in the process. Grabbing the bat and yanking the hook out would be too unthinkable. So the only choice seemed as if it would be to run away, leaving the struggling animal on the end of the line, and to return the next morning to collect the rod and hope that a fox had happened along and eaten the bat and not swallowed the hook along the bat, so that too it now struggled somewhere in the woods, dragging the fishing pole by the taut line that now ran from its gut up through his throat and tore out the side of his mouth. So when the bats came out, George cooked what fish he had and watched the darkness settle and went home. Okay, so I'm going to stop, or not going to stop there, but I'm going to wait because we only have 9 minutes left and I want to make sure we get through this little section. I think this water is amazing because we are now watching Howard, who is now able to somehow understand what George is imagining at the same time. And I love what George imagines because to me, it is that ultimate ordered pattern where there is a complete unity of the world as opposed to the separation. Right now, George and his father are separated. They are literally separated because he's spying on his son and one of them doesn't know the other one is there. They are separated in George's mind right now. They are separated right now between this boundary of George and what he knows and what he doesn't know about his dad. But in this moment that George imagines, I just love it because you have this such like, there was an old lady who swallowed a fly. I don't know why she swallowed. You guys know that thing? No. But anyway, this idea that like the bat eats the fly and the fox eats the bat, which eats the fly. And there's this idea of the kind of great chain of things being interconnected. And what George fears is that somehow that chain, he's afraid of that chain occurring. But my favorite image is when all of this gets woven together, because the fly is on a string, which a bat eats, which a fox eats, and then the fox runs around in his imagination at night and weaves this web of this thin filament of thread throughout the natural world, where everything is connected. The trees and the lake and the creatures, and they're going inside and outside. And I have this vision of this woven thing. Remember Howard weaving the tapestry where he put some flowers and some things together, and he said, and then I'm going to put that together. So many times in this book, Howard is going to be kind of woven between light and dark. And if you put your finger right there and you go back to page 55 in your hymnal, I think that's what happens in some of these Borealis sections. This is the shortest Borealis section. It's on page 55. No, it's a different one. The page 55 one. This is the Cosmos Borealis. The word cosmos means the idea that the universe is an ordered whole, you know? And so the idea that this Borealis section, there are 6 Borealis sections in the book. There are 3 in chapter 1 and there are 3 in chapter 4. I don't know what the Borealis sections are. Here's my thought. I think the Borealis sections are, Howard has seizures, and Howard fancies himself kind of a poet. So I believe that Howard goes home and describes what he thinks he saw during the seizure in his little journal, which I believe that Sam is reading to George on his deathbed. Does that make sense? I think you have clues that that's the case, but I don't know. I'm just making this stuff up. Okay. But anyway, so in the Cosmos Borealis section on page, thank you, Sarah, for the comment. Like and subscribe. My Patreon is set up. You can donate. Anyway, on the bottom of page 45, or in the middle of page 55, light skin of sky and cloud and mountain on the still pond, water body beneath the teeming with reeds and silt and trout sealed in a day, skin and night skin and ice lids which we draw out with silk threads, fitted with snags of fur or bright feathers, skin like glass, like liquid, like skin, our words scribed on slick surfaces, reflecting risen moon, spinning stars, flitting bats, so we only have to whisper across the wide plate. Green drakes blossom, powder dry among stars, glowing white, out of pods which rose at the muck, blah, 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 blah. So I find the weaving there, where me and the universe and plants and nature and above and below and water and sky, they're all kind of woven in this tapestry of one, which reminds me a lot of when George is imagining what would happen if a fox ate a bat at the end of the, at the end of the fishing line, you know? I don't know. I get that image quite a bit in the book. All right. So if we go back, which page were we on? 87? No, 70. 79, 89. You know, we're going to run out of time, and I have to time things well. Skip to page 90 in your book. He puts the mouse on the barge, and he lights the mouse on fire. Did you guys see anything on power in that little end of that section? It's the bottom of page 90. Well, I can do this. Can I do this? No, we're going to run out of time. Now, this will be the last thing we do. We're on the bottom of page 89. George walked to the water, bottom of page 89. We'll finish this. And Howard follows silently behind at a distance. At the edge boundary of the water, George cut a panel of bark and birch tree with his jackknife. He sewed the bark together at each end with a heavy sewing needle. There's so many images of sewing and weaving in this book. A dark thread, making a canoe top of 80-shaped boat. He placed the tiny coffin in the middle of the craft and laid a piece of coal, which he took from the pocket of his overalls next to him. He lit the coal with a kitchen match, which he struck on his zipper fly, launched the boat. It floated out into the pond. The burning coal illuminated the birch bark and made it look like some sort of glowing animal hide. The air was still on the surface of the pond, was sleek and reflective, like oil. It seemed thick like oil, too, because ripples trailing off the back of the little boat spread so slowly, as if the skin of the water, page 55 again, offered more resistance against the influence of bodies passing in the night. White moths came up from the grass at the pond's edge and fluttered out of the boat to flirt with the fire. This is very Disney movie-ish, right? The fire reached the matchbox and rubbed at it until it began to smoke. When the fire reached the inside of the box and touched the kerosene-soaked shroud, there was a bright, quiet thump, and the fire was gulped in flame. The birch crackled and spat sparks, and then there was a gout of whitish smoke, which Howard imagined was the mouse burning. George's silhouette, I want to talk about silhouettes tomorrow, lit up against the flame on the water. The pyre sank with a hiss and a final spurt of smoke, and the pond went dark and was quiet again. And here's the part I was going to ask you about. Cremation came to Howard's mind, a vision of Viking kings lying on their funeral beds on the decks of dragon-prow ships, swords in hand, set alight, sent ablazing into the dark surf, flames snapping from the ship's sterns like pennants in a gale. So what do we have in this moment, this very small moment? We have something epic. That's the beginning of Beowulf, by the way. If you've never read Beowulf, Beowulf begins with this Viking funeral. This is an epic allusion to this moment, which is so private. It's a public affair, private affair made public. It is a temporary affair. And you know what one thing epics are? Epics exist beyond time. We're going to be reading about these epics that are thousands of years old, and they're this moment that extends time. This is a huge, powerful vision. What did we start today with? A ship. What did we end today with? A ship. Somebody in here will write a paper about anatomical imagery, all the hands and bones and veins. Somebody in here will write a paper about all the boats. You're just looking for stuff as you read. One of your papers is doing that. That's super hard. Another paper is taking a small passage, like just this description of the mouse burning, and writing 5 pages on that. Could you do that? Could you talk about allusions and short sentences and images and whatever? I have to give you 3 pieces of paper. And I'm sorry I'm rushing so much. My time is, I'm going to have to learn time. Piece of paper number 1. If you are online at home, these are in the thing at home. You guys will have these now. They'll have them in class. You know, I kind of have to even make copies for next week today, which is crazy. So the first piece of paper we have, oh my gosh. This is what one of your papers is going to be, where you pull a small passage up. And we're going to do this together tomorrow, but you're not here. This is page 34 in your book. This we're going to do tomorrow as well. This is an AP exam. This is what AP really wants you to do, and you're going to see how similar it looks to what we're doing with Tinker. That's 2. And then the last thing we're going to deal with next week, but you're not, oh, sorry. The last thing is how I grade. This is a rubric that you're going to just keep for reference, and I'll ask you to pull it out at some point, maybe tomorrow, maybe in the future. Okay? Makes sense? Sorry. And now you only have 7.4 minutes. Is this crazy or what? You all right? All right, Sydney. Have a nice day. Thanks, guys. Sorry. So tomorrow you check in on Google Classroom. Hopefully there's a Google YouTube video. Take attendance in Google Classroom. Don't smoke. If you're at home, goodbye. Ending stream. Bye. Have a nice day. End stream. Bye. Bye.